Mel, I've just dedicated my 30-year career to the leadership development industry, and my first book was called Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow. And it did extraordinarily well, mainly because, much like you, okay, not 2 million copies, but much like you, my book touched a nerve in terms of sort of the underbelly of leadership and how hard leadership is, and that it's important to own your mess, because then you can make it safe for others to own theirs and teach through your mistakes. I would argue that you are one of the lead thought leaders that has ushered in the safety of having the conversation around anxiety and trauma and your challenges, and really helping to make vulnerability an actual parenting, spousal, friend, leadership competency. You talk frequently and openly on your social media and in your books about your own struggle with anxiety and panic disorders, and I don't mean to put you on the spot for that, but is there anything you would follow up with that would help our audience of millions of people around the world that perhaps have a colleague or a spouse or their boss or an employee, child that perhaps is facing some of those issues, or they themselves as well, that would maybe give everybody a light and some inspiration this morning?
Yeah, of course. So I would tackle it in two different ways. I'd tackle it in two different ways when you're dealing with somebody at work, especially if you're the manager or the leader at work, and somebody in your personal life. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's really important to be compassionate and understanding and supportive of, everybody in your life. But I'm not out to turn leaders and managers or anybody into a therapist. Because the fact of the matter is, when somebody's struggling, whether they're struggling with anxiety or depression, or they're struggling with issues related to trauma or PTSD, or heck, they're just struggling because we're still living through a global pandemic, and every single human being's nervous system right now has been switched into a state of fight or flight. And so, everybody, after 2 years of this, Scott, is living in a condition in their bodies that human beings are not designed to live in. We all feel emotionally taxed. We all feel the fatigue from being on Zoom conference calls all day long. We all feel the giant, are you kidding me? As we see the virus continue to mutate and closings and this and that. And so at this moment, what leaders need to know is your team is emotionally, physically, and spiritually gassed. What they need from you is they need more appreciation. They need to be given a little bit more trust. And what I'm going to say about that, and I've been hammering this in speeches. I've been hammering this because I believe that every single company had the exact same response when the pandemic hit. And it is a very typical response because it's a response that tracks to the normal anxiety response. So as we unpack anxiety, Scott, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I promise we will end up in a place where there's lots of takeaway. So anxiety, first and foremost, everybody, it's a very important thing to have in life. Yes, you heard Mel Robbins say that. Anxiety is really important because all that anxiety is anxiety is an internal alarm system that is hardwired in your nervous system. And that alarm system has one job. The alarm system called anxiety has the job of making you pay attention. That's it. There is some kind of threat, some kind of uncertainty. When anxiety races through your body, you come alive and you go into a state of hyperfocus. Your nervous system switches into your sympathetic nervous system. You immediately go on edge. Your spidey senses come up. Your prefrontal cortex engages. Your heart starts to race. All of this, by the way, tied to evolution to keep you safe. Anxiety is a good thing when there is an actual threat.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say, Scott, that you and I are driving down the road and we're chatting up a storm and we're driving, to go do a speech or whatever. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a semi truck cuts right into our lane and you have to swerve, right, to get out of the way. As that semi truck, Scott, cuts into our lane, what do you feel in your body?
A rush of adrenaline, fear for my life. I need to take immediate control over my safety because that driver doesn't know I'm alive or he wouldn't have cut in my lane.
Yeah, like immediately anxiety rips through your body, and anxiety is serving a purpose. It's sounding the alarm so that you stop talking to me and you pay attention. And all of a sudden your brain takes over, you swerve without even thinking about it, and your heart races, and all the blood runs to your major organs so that you can go into a state of hyperfocus. The reason why people feel nervous or anxious or excited before a test or before a speech is because you're going into a state of hyperfocus. Anxiety, that feeling in your body, is now making you align with what you're about to do so you can focus on it and perform. In the example that I just gave you, anxiety served a purpose. And here's what's interesting. As the truck pulls away and you kind of pull back into your lane, what happens in your body now that the truck is gone and we're driving down the road safely?
In my body or my wife's body?
In your body.
Well, in my body, I would, that anxiety probably stays for a little while, not for an hour, but probably, 45 seconds or so as I begin to calm down and kind of put it into context, and we're safe, we're alive, it's not going to happen again probably immediately. So I probably recover pretty quickly, but there's a lingering effect.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the 45 seconds, because it is less than 90 seconds that most people switch from one emotional state to the other when there's intellectual context. So your body starts to slow down and it goes from the on-edge state, alert state, into what's called the parasympathetic state, which is your kind of rest and relaxed state, in about 90 seconds, because your brain sees the truck leave and your brain goes, oh, no threat. The problem for people today, and this is true of everybody on your team, is that we have been living in a heightened state of uncertainty. And every single person on the planet, their nervous system right now is either flipped into the fight or flight mode of feeling on edge, or it's like a trigger, immediately flips into it. And so the normal things that somebody wouldn't stress out, they're super stressed out. And this is important to understand, because I want you to, as a leader, to think about, first, let's talk about work. Assume that most people are at the end of their rope. They're trying the best that they can. They are burning the candle at both ends. They're having a hard time focusing and concentrating. And they're feeling uncertain and on edge. Because even if their work life is good, there's something going on with their kids at college. There's something going on with their kids in the high school. There's something going on with somebody in their family. And, the spike in this sense of anxiety, the spike that we're seeing in terms of people's mental health is extraordinary. And I'm sure you're hearing the same thing from corporations that I'm hearing, which is that the number one concern that people have right now at the highest level in every single company, whether they're publicly traded or they're a small family business, is the well-being of their employees. And so one thing that you can do is, number one, you can encourage people to take time off. Number two, you can consciously, as a leader, make a strategic and intentional decision to move out of the mode that your company has been in for probably 2 years, because there are 3 phases to this pandemic that has impacted every corporation on the planet and every leader on the planet. Phase number 1 was life as it used to be, right? Because when the pandemic first hit, it was sort of like, oh my gosh, what's changing about life as it used to be? What life as it used to be? We're going to go back to the way life used to be. Phase number 2 was full-on crisis. Oh my gosh, we're in this. Yeah. And what you saw an anxiety response from every single company on the planet, because we had to. Everything got turned upside down. The rules got rewritten overnight. Everybody had to pivot and to innovate and to switch and to innovate. Like, it was incredible. And there was so much amazingness that came out of it. There's going to be, when we look back on this period, this is going to be one of the most rapid periods of innovation and disruption in a very positive way when it comes to business operations, the way that people work, like all kinds of stuff. But one of the disruptions that has been horrible for people is that companies immediately jumped to nonstop video conference calls. And what has happened for human beings who are working hybrid or working remote is that people feel like they need to always be online. And there are lots of companies that also still have a policy 2 years later that your camera is required to be on. This is a horrible thing to be doing to people. And the reason why it's a horrible thing to be doing to people is, number one, it communicates mistrust, which makes somebody who's already stressed out feel even worse. But number two, based on the brain science, here's what we know. If you're on a video conference call and you're staring at yourself, having to stare at yourself activates this part of your brain, Scott. When the prefrontal cortex is engaged, the rate at which you drain the fuel in your brain increases dramatically. The reason why it is so difficult for everybody to be productive right now, for everybody to focus, the reason why people feel more anxious, the reason why people feel more distracted, the reason why people feel like, my gosh, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I feel like I need 3 martinis and a nap. Like I have 4 more hours for the rest of the day or 10. The reason is because you are having to work in an environment that is triggering stress and anxiety and being on edge. Staring at yourself all day on camera is draining the fuel in your brain. And companies reacted so like panic mode that they haven't pulled back yet and stepped into phase 3 of the pandemic, which is, this is the new reality. Let's stop pretending there is some sort of milestone that is out in the future that's going to solve all this. And let's get strategic and let's get intentional about how we're going to work, because everything in the company can't be important or else nothing is. And every meeting can't be 50 people on a Zoom call because nobody can get work done. And we need to go back to getting intentional and strategic about what's important and going back to the basics of making sure people's weekly jobs are aligned with what matters. And we need to allow people and trust them to get their work done. That's one thing that you can do as a leader. Less Zoom calls, more appreciation, and cameras off. That's going to help people a ton when it comes to anxiety at work. The other thing that will help people a ton is triple down on appreciation. What I've figured out in researching the high five habit and having 145,000 people from 91 countries go through a 5-day online challenge that I led about the high five habit. In 5 days, Scott, not a single person reported that this high five habit didn't work. And what I've learned in researching the power of appreciation and developing habits of encouragement is that the most motivating force on the planet is to feel appreciated, to feel like somebody sees you and hears you and actually appreciates you. And I know that you talk about this a lot. People, and we're talking about the Great Resignation, right? And companies make the mistake of thinking that people are leaving organizations because they're looking for better compensation. That's not true. People leave organizations. There was a huge McKinsey study that proved this recently. They leave organizations because they don't feel valued or appreciated, and they don't feel like they belong. And so this should be a giant red flag for every leader out there. You've got the Great Resignation. You've got people really starting to think about what they value and what matters to them. You've got a hybrid work environment where it's going to take more intentionality to make people feel like they belong and to make sure that they feel appreciated. And so you've got to make sure that this is priority number one as you head into this next year. That the focus is on how do I make sure that people's work is getting recognized, that people feel visible, and that I am pointing out all the things they're doing right instead of harping on the thing that they're doing wrong. That is something that you can do that goes way beyond the corporate programs that people put in place. It's the basic blocking and tackling of making sure that everybody that reports to you feels appreciated by you. And it takes work. It takes a lot of work to build that as a muscle as a leader. Let me talk to you about anxiety. So first of all, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mel Robbins, and you're meeting me as a international best-selling author and a very, very prolific partner of Audibles. But I struggled with anxiety for 2 decades. I have 3 kids, 2 of them with pretty significant issues with anxiety, thanks to me, because it can be genetic. Anxiety is nothing more than a system, an alarm system in your body. Okay, that's all that anxiety is. Anxiety has a purpose. Anxiety's purpose is to warn you that there's something up. Okay, now anxiety can be a really good thing in certain situations. So for example, have any of you ever been in a situation where you're either about to cross the street or you're driving in a car and all of a sudden out of nowhere, oh my God, I didn't see it, like a car swerves, or you almost pull into somebody's lane, or you almost step into traffic? Have you had that experience happen? Yes, you see all the hearts. Everyone's like, of course. Well, that flood that you feel in your body, that's anxiety. That's all. It's just your body's hardwired to go like, warning, 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 before your mind even realizes what's going on. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're in a car and all of a sudden you're about to hit another car and you swerve out of the way, the second that the threat is over, your body settles down, because your mind can look around and go, the threat is gone. We can all just calm down now. The issue, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety right now, is that all the uncertainty, whether it's about the pandemic or the economy or the election or the fight for social justice, or whether or not you're going to keep your job, or whether or not the person that you're living with is going to come home angry and start fighting with you, like all of those things that create uncertainty, they create a constant feeling in your body that something's up. And the way that your mind and your body work together is that the second that the anxiety signal goes up in your body, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, your mind starts to look for reasons that can explain it. Because in the example I gave you of the car, when you see the car go away, your mind tells your body you can calm down. What's happened for everybody on the planet right now is ever since COVID-19 hit, people have been living with a heightened state of anxiety that's never gone down. And so what you need to do, and I talk about it in detail in on almost every single project I've ever done for Audible, frankly. But what you need to do is what I was saying in the very beginning. You need to do some work every day to just keep your nervous system settling down. That's number one. And number two, you need to start to understand what are the things that are triggering your anxiety. You need to write those triggers down. And then you need to come up with what I call anchor thoughts, which are ways to turn the alarm off. And anchor thoughts are your go-to thoughts that you're going to think in any situation where your anxiety is triggered. You see the, maybe there's a presidential debate tonight. Maybe that's making you anxious. I have no idea. And so your mind starts to spiral, right? When you think about the election, you think about what's happening, you think about the vitriol in this country, whatever. You could come up with a thought pattern that no matter what happens, this country will get through it. No matter what happens, we're going to get through it. No matter what happens, like you could say something in your mind that then lowers the tension, okay? I really love your work because you are trying to get us all to go to the source of what's triggering mental health issues, which is stored experiences
Yeah.
and the alarm in your body and your inability to tolerate or understand what's happening when it goes off. And so I have recently had this experience where I'm waking up and I get these waves of anxiety. And what's interesting is that this is not new for me. I mean, I've struggled with anxiety for 30 years, but we have just recently had a number of huge changes in our life. And I now live in a different state in a very small town. And when I wake up in the morning in the middle of all this change, my alarm is not on the nightstand next to me. It begins in my ankles, and it's like a hot lava wave that goes from my ankles, up my legs, all the way up my stomach, and then it solidifies in my chest. And as soon as I feel this wave, my immediate thought is not, oh, I want to feel the alarm. It's, fuck, why am I feeling this? I don't want to feel dread. And then I feel like I just want to hide from it or like try to fall asleep. And I know that it's just my body reacting to all this change. Like it's some sort of stored experience that is coming up. And I've been working so hard on not freaking out when I feel it,
Right.
but turning toward it. And as a medical doctor and a neuroscientist and somebody who has struggled with anxiety for 30 years, why is turning toward this alarm the answer in that moment? Like, what would happen? Like, tell me what happens when you turn toward it and you put your hands on your chest, or you go, oh, thank you. You're just trying to protect me because you're scared to death that you now live in Vermont and you have no friends and you're very far away from your kids and you're going to live alone here on this mountain and be even more lonely. Like, I get through this whole like catastrophizing, which only make it worse, versus welcome this bullshit in. Like, I don't want to. Like, I just don't want it to be there, Russ.
Yeah, I get it. What if it's not bullshit though, Mel? What if it's little Mel? Did you have a nickname when you were a little girl?
This really is becoming therapy, isn't it?
Oh, well, I give it a try.
Yeah, when you started talking about the mismatch with the mom, I'm like, I hope my mother doesn't listen to this episode because I even feel guilty for admitting that we are kind of a mismatch or are a mismatch. Yeah, well, my sometimes my mom calls me Melly, and friends of mine call me Melly, and yeah, friends of mine called me Melly.
Is there a name that you relate to as a child? A nickname that you relate to?
You know, in many ways, I think Mel, because I still feel very much like a child at times, and I still feel like that vulnerable kid, and I still feel like the person that's on the outside looking in. I feel separate. Like that word separate makes a lot of sense for me. Like there's a feeling that I have in life that I'm observing what's happening, but I'm not a part of it.
Yeah, and just because you've kind of given me permission here, I mean, you've spent a lot of your life outrunning your anxiety, right? And it's worked for you, Mel. Like, you're very successful. It's worked for you. I see this with a lot of very intelligent people. They can intellectually kind of outrun their anxiety.
What does that even mean?
It means that you keep yourself so busy that you don't get a chance to sit with that alarm in your body.
I don't want to sit with it. That's why.
Exactly.
Why do you think moving to Vermont where there's nothing to do is so fucking terrifying? Like I can't run to Target to make my anxiety go away.
Right.
Like I feel like I'm addicted to negative stress. And this addiction to negative stress is what I've done to numb my anxiety.
Well, it's sublimating it.
That is a big word. What does sublimating mean?
Sure. Sorry. You've taken this energy and you found a way to make it work for you.
So I've taken the negative alarm or the alarm in my body and I've channeled it in a direction so I don't have to feel it.
Yes.
And when you said, what if the alarm is trying to help you?
Yeah.
What the hell did you mean by that?
What if it's little Mel? What if it's the younger version of you saying, "Hey, I need some attention." And then when you say, "Fuck off, I don't want to feel you." Literally, what if you had a child come up to you in a grocery store and they were crying and they had their hands up in the air to pick them up? Would you push them away? Would you go, see ya, fuck off? No, you wouldn't. You'd pick that damn child up. But we won't do it for ourselves.
God, that's
That's the
so
problem.
true.
Yeah, we won't do it for ourselves. We'll do it for our
Wait,
pets. Yeah,
you're
go ahead.
right. You're absolutely right. Like if somebody else had an alarm going off in their body
Yep.
and they were like freaking out or worried or sad or upset or needing attention or reassurance, you would give that to them. But
Without hesitation. I'm sure with Sawyer and Oakley, you do that all the time.
all the time.
Yeah, but you don't do it for yourself.
No. And I think that this is the singular biggest mistake that society has made around understanding anxiety. I just had a huge breakthrough here. Holy
Good.
shit, Russ.
Good.
Okay, so let me
Thank you
just
for
see if
being
I can give this back to everybody listening.
Sure.
So it's the fact that you're scared of the alarm or you can't tolerate it and you don't understand what it's trying to ask of you that makes it worse.
Yes.
And if you were to realize that any tension or fear or kind of scary feeling in your body is an alarm system that
From your
is
child.
from your inner child
Or young.
asking you for reassurance or love or attention, and you just gave yourself that reassurance or love or attention, the alarm would turn off. Is that what you're saying?
Slowly, yeah, because it's been an adaptation for you too. You got to remember that the ego thinks it's protecting you by firing.
I don't understand what the ego is. That's too
Oh.
intellectual for me. So
have to have me back.
I will
That's
have you back to talk about the ego. But the second anybody says ego, I'm like, oh, this is somebody who's way smarter than me. I don't want to try to figure out what the hell an ego is. Like, so, and we will have you back because we all need to know what the ego is. However,
Sure.
I just want to stay on this because I think this is a groundbreaking idea that I want everybody who either has some level of situational or generalized anxiety or loves somebody who has situational or generalized anxiety. And at this moment in time, that would be every human being on the planet. And I want you to understand that we have been taught that we're supposed to attack it from the neck up with the thinking first. And that's one of the things you need to do to cope. But the real heart of healing your anxiety, which you claim you've done, and I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
But and I don't mean to use the word claim like I don't believe you.
I claim that I have gotten so much better, but yeah. My
Well,
God.
you're a medical doctor, so you can say that. I feel like I understand anxiety. I still hate it. And I need to have a different relationship with it.
You do.
And I need to, and everybody needs, for the sake of your kids, the people that you love, for yourself, you need to understand this alarm system in your body and the fact that it desperately needs you. And you need to take a neck down approach to listening to the alarm and diffusing it in a way that, wow. So over time, if you do this, the alarm doesn't go off as much?
No, yeah, that's true. It's not as intense, and you're not compulsively running up into your head when you feel the alarm. So if I had a motorcycle in my front yard, I used to work emerge as a doc, and it's like I don't,
Does emerge mean emergency?
Oh, emergency, yeah.
Okay, so
the
you used to
emergency-
work in the emergency room as a doctor.
I delivered babies. I did kind of the whole kind of general thing.
Okay.
Now, if I had a motorcycle in my front yard, that's why I bring up motorcycles, is because I used to see bad accidents with motorcycles. I don't condone motorcycles. I think they're fun, but they're dangerous. Anyway, sidetrack. So if I had a motorcycle in my front, I've never ridden one before. So if I had a motorcycle in my front driveway and I had 50 books on how to drive a motorcycle, ride a motorcycle, and then I go out to the motorcycle, I sit on it and I go, no, you know what? I got to go back and I got to read a little more about how the brakes work. And then until you get on that frickin' motorcycle and ride it around and maybe fall off a few times, which is the same thing with the emotion. As soon as you get on the alarm, you start actually feeling better. Like when you said about that thing about the person in the school drop off, As
Mm-hmm.
soon as you put your hand over that place of alarm, you will feel instantly better. I'm not saying it's going to, take it from a 9 to a 2, but it's going to take it from a 9 to a 4 because you're actually, from a consciousness perspective, you're actually going at the root source of the problem, which is this little child in you that says, I don't like this person. And it's not this person, it's basically, I don't like someone from my past that this person reminds me of. That's
Or I don't like the feeling that I have in my body when I see this person, and
Yeah.
this is a familiar feeling from my past.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
for example,
alarm is-
if you had like a chaotic parent or an unpredictable parent or a mentally ill parent or an absent parent, this goes back to your original point. When you have a parent that you can't either connect with or that is unpredictable or that makes you feel invisible or not safe, that alarm system in your body develops as a child. And that is what you're saying when you say all anxiety has resulted because of separation anxiety as a child. When you feel separate or unsafe or unseen or not heard or not loved or invisible in your home, that original experience that you probably don't remember,
Yeah.
that encoded your body when you were tiny.
Yeah.
And anytime then from that point forward, anytime you again felt invisible or you felt attacked or you felt unloved, that alarm got even stronger. And so now it's like this automatic response in your body to those situations where you feel separate. Am I getting this?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and what happens is when we feel the alarm, we go up into our heads to escape it because we feel this alarm in our body. It's like, I don't want to feel this. So we go up into our heads and we try and think, well, what could this be? We analyze, we go into this, we have this like just fixation, this left hemisphere fixation on figuring stuff out, which basically just creates more of a problem. I talk about in my book about, Ulysses and the Siren Island, so Ulysses
Again, you're way smarter than me, so you got to tell me the story.
Okay, so it's
Is
basically
this like a
this
Greek myth class that I skipped in college? Okay.
Yeah, it's that English stuff. I'd much rather write a physics exam than an English exam. But anyway, so it's basically Siren Island. So there's these beautiful women on this island, and what the sailors will do when they hear these beautiful women singing is they'll run their ships aground, and then they'll try and swim to these sirens. And the sirens turn into monsters and kill them, hack them apart, whatever they want to do. So it basically, that's your thoughts. Your thoughts are like Siren Island. Your thoughts are trying to suck you into going, hey, we have the answer, we have the answer, when all they have is more problem. You're not going to solve anxiety, which is basically a problem of overthinking with more frickin' thinking. It's just not going to work.
Well, okay, so can I ask you a question? Why the hell, if there is an alarm system wired in our body,
Yeah.
why is our brain not able to go, it's just an alarm system? Just give yourself a hug and take a deep breath. Thank it for trying to protect you. Next. Why do we not just automatically say that? Why do we kill ourselves in our own minds with our thoughts?
Because we don't understand it's there in the first place. We don't understand.
The alarm?
Yeah. We don't understand that it's our younger self asking for our attention. So we feel pain. And like any organism, we withdraw from pain. And it's like the motorcycle that is on the front. If I don't get on that motorcycle and ride it around, maybe fall off a couple of times, I'm never really going to learn how to acclimatize to that emotion, that alarm. Bessel van der Kolk talks about that in The Body Keeps the Score. We're not teaching people how to get rid of their anxiety. We're teaching them how to acclimatize to it. And then I add on to that and stop adding thoughts to it. Because as soon as you add thoughts to the alarm, A, you're getting out of the problem, and B, you're just making it worse. So yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So basically, we get in this thing what I call the alarm anxiety cycle. So something triggers us. Say we're in that lineup. We see this person that we don't like, and then we go, "Oh, why don't I like this person? I should really try and make an effort. I should really." And it's like, "Well, no, she did this or he did
I'm
that."
like, don't make eye contact. Get on
Yep.
the phone. Make a fake phone call. Avoid. Turn shoulder. Holy shit, are they closer? Like, I'm like, what?
Run away!
Yes.
Run away! To quote a Monty Python thing. So basically, what we're doing is we're trying to intellectualize the alarm that we're feeling in our body, and it's not, the solution isn't in our minds. The solution's in our body, which is why so many people have a hard time healing from anxiety, because we're trying to use more thoughts to combat overthinking.
My big takeaway right now so far is that all the thinking that we reflexively do about the feelings in our body makes the alarm louder. And that we have to learn to stop going above the neck and thinking about what's going on. And we need to train ourselves to go below the neck into our bodies and turn toward the alarm and give ourselves the reassurance and the soothing or whatever it is that the alarm is asking for in that moment.
Yeah.
And that if you do that, you are now taking step one on the path of truly, what would you call
Getting at the
it?
root
Dealing, calming, curing your anxiety.
Getting at the root cause.
Getting at the root cause.
That's exactly what it is. You're getting at the root cause, which is the alarm. The thoughts are not the cause. The thoughts are a symptom. So the thoughts are just a byproduct of this alarm that's stuck in your body. Now, thoughts do cause, anxiety. There's no two ways about that. But I think where the mismanage is, where the mistake is that we believe the thoughts originate before the feeling. And I'm saying the feeling starts before the thought.
The feeling starts before the thought. Because every one of us knows a kid that can work themselves up into a panic attack because they think they're going to throw up.
Sure.
And what I now realize after years of having kids with anxiety and reading so many books about this subject that I should have a PhD, and being in years of therapy myself, is that if a child, like let's take my son. So our son Oakley, when he was little, he was constantly picked on at school. So of course he felt nervous in the morning before he had to head into school.
Sure.
Plus the kid had dyslexia and ADHD, all of which was not diagnosed. So he's heading into a full day in a classroom where he physiologically, neurologically is incapable of doing what is going to be asked of him. And so his body, before entering that situation, sounds an alarm.
Totally.
And when the alarm sounds and the physiological changes happen, guess what physiological feeling he has? His stomach starts to rumble because as the physiology of the alarm changes and the chemistry in his digestive tract changes, he starts getting butterflies that feel like pterodactyls. And then all of a sudden, instead of just giving himself a hug and going, it's going to be okay. Today's going to be an okay day. I can face this. Instead of reassuring himself, he goes into his head and says, oh my God, my stomach, I think I'm going to puke. I can't go to school. Holy, and he ramps himself. We were dealing with panic attacks with this kid where he would literally bang his head on the kitchen island. I don't want to go to school, crying. He would force himself to throw. He would get so worked up, he would actually throw up. I mean, it was horrible. And I now can see that all of the interventions that were being done with this kid with therapists, which were all about just change the channel upstairs.
Right.
And then he would turn to them and say, but sometimes when I change the channel, it takes me to a channel I don't want to watch. So what if I change the channel of my thoughts and I get another bad thought? Like even he was reacting against it, but nobody taught us that what the kid needed was a hug, validation, reassurance in that moment physically to get the alarm to quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it.
When you're in a situation like you are that is wildly stressful, but it's finite, meaning this is temporary. You just said it's a fact. Your parents are getting worse. Eventually they're going to die. We don't know how much time this is going to take, but we do know it's not going to go on forever. This is temporary. When you're in this situation, you've got one of three choices. You can either engage in magical thinking and try to convince yourself that somehow your parents are going to recover and they're going to die in their sleep. I do not like that choice because it's not actually aligned with the facts, and it also requires something to happen outside of you, so you don't have any control. So that is a dumb thing, but you could do it. The second thing that you could do is, if you can afford it, You could replace yourself in the situation. You could hire somebody to do the job that you're doing. You could cajole your family members to help you and support you through that. That's a choice that you have. Or there's the third thing. You can change your attitude about what's happening. And this is where you need to focus. Because if you're resisting this, if you're anxious about it, if you're stressed about it, if you're gripped about it, you're going to torture yourself as you go through something. And you don't need to do that. If you're the only person that's caring for declining, aging, very stressful parents, you got to make sure you take care of yourself. You need to make sure that you are doing some kind of mindfulness practice. And personally, I would outsource it. I would get some audiobooks to listen to, or the Calm app, or one of these other meditation apps that you listen to as you're commuting back and forth to your parents, or as you're driving them places, or as you're in the kitchen cooking, that you're listening to something that is calming your mind. I want you to institute some kind of very small self-care something right now that is a daily practice, that becomes a daily ritual. It's just something you're doing for you. It could be as simple as taking a walk around the block in the morning in silence. It could be pouring a glass of wine at night and stepping outside and staring at the stars. It could be setting a timer at 3:45 in the afternoon and pouring yourself a cup of tea and taking 15 minutes for yourself. But you must put something in place every single day that acts as a grounding moment, that grounds you back in your body, that grounds you back into your life, and that gives you a moment to exhale. You just accept where things are and start working on your attitude. You remind yourself that this is temporary. Practice mindfulness by listening to meditation apps, and you find one simple ritual to do every day for you. And that is how you are going to weather this storm. Because that's the only choice you got. You can suffer through it, or you can support yourself through it. But either way, honey, you're going to have to go through it. We're going to talk about sleep and anxiety with this question from Jason.
Hey Mel, this is Jason. I always get anxious before I go to bed and then wake up in the middle of the night worrying about things. How do I stop myself from doing that? Thank you.
Let's first talk about what are some changes or some simple things that Jason or anybody who gets anxious at night can start doing.
Well, I love your little 3-2-1 thing. 3 hours before, then the 2 hours before no work, and then 1 hour before like no screens, and that's really important because our reticular activating system, which you've talked about before, which works in our brainstem, which is the lower part of our brain that controls our body, it wants to be active. It wants to pick out things in your environment, and if you're zombie scrolling Instagram until the moment before you go to sleep, that reticular activating system is still going. So it will wake you up because it thinks that, thousands and thousands of years ago, you needed to stay alert because there was a threat during the night. And the other thing about that particular question is, what was going to bed like for you as a child? Was it safe? For me, my mother worked shift work. So sometimes my mother was out 3 to 11. So she was a nurse. So sometimes my mother was gone. And I'm there with, my crazy father, and but he wasn't always crazy, but there was points where it was just a little touch and go there. So evenings for me can have that sort of sense as well. So what was going on in your childhood? Not that everything is about childhood trauma. I really don't want to give that impression that everything is about it, but so much of chronic anxiety is unresolved fear and unresolved wounding. So what was, can you find the child in you that had a difficult time going to bed? Or maybe you were a bedwetter. Maybe the image of that is still imprinted on your nervous system, that it's not safe to sleep, because when I sleep, I wet the bed, and then all sorts of, all hell breaks loose in the morning. So there's all sorts of like physiological and psychological stuff that goes into sleep. And it's really important to be able to tease that out a little bit. I can give you generalities like, shut the computer off, before you go to sleep, and calm things down, keep the lights low, don't use blue light, all that kind of stuff. It's all important. But those are, again, coping mechanisms. If you really want to fix the problem at its root, find that place where it was uncomfortable for you to go to bed, and see if you can find that place in you. And again, not that everything is childhood trauma, but so much of it is, and it is fixable. So if that's the underlying root cause, you're not going to fix it just by avoiding blue light, just by avoiding the computer, just by not working. The best thing to do is use a two-pronged approach. And the last thing I want to put in there, I don't have anything against cognitive therapy. We have these huge prefrontal cortices. It's really important that we have an understanding of what's happening to us.
Yes.
But what's more important, and what often most therapy in North America specifically misses, is this incredible role of the body and old trauma that's stored in the body, and just virtually gets ignored by thinking that we can talk about our problems and having insight to them is going to fix them. And it doesn't.
Well, my personal experience is that I think it took me decades to heal, because I became so good at talking about my anxiety and intellectualizing my anxiety and talking about what happened to me and how it made me feel. And all of that was helpful, so that I was aware of what happened. I was aware of what I was feeling. And I also, from that level, was able to come up with ways to cope, whether that was yoga or taking anxiety medication, or it was getting into therapy. But I wasn't doing the work to truly heal the root cause of the anxiety. And it wasn't until I stopped fucking talking about it and I got below the neck and started dealing with the uncomfortable feelings and the stored memories in my nervous system, which is very different than talking about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into your body and feeling that kink in the nervous system, that memory that you wish that you could forget. That is when I truly flipped the pancake, so to speak, and started to change for real.
And how did that feel? Like when you felt like you were really getting at the root cause of it? Like how
it's
did that
liberating.
feel for you? It is.
It's liberating.
Totally.
And it's a paradigm shift. And I can't believe how, like, I don't want to make any promises, and I'm not the therapist here. We've got the medical doctor and the anxiety world-renowned specialist here with Dr. Kennedy. I couldn't believe how quickly it happened. Like, when I got serious that this is not about what's going on in my head, it's about patterns of feeling that get triggered in my body that create an alarm. And then my mind gets involved. And I have been attacking it in the wrong order. I have been attacking it first and only in my mind. And yes, you gotta start with your mind so that you're aware that you're like, that's where you're like, ding, 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 ding. Oh, it's anxiety.
Yes.
But once you know what you're dealing with, get out of your head and get into your body. And when I started to feel like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not nuts in my mind. I have a nervous system that needs some support. I got to smooth it out. I got to make sure that any of the cuts in the system or the kinks or the whatever, that those are all kind of healed. And I got to be able to tolerate uncomfortable feelings and not have it escalate. And I got to learn how to soothe myself, and I got to learn how to be compassionate with myself. If I can do those things, I can ride the ups and downs of any feeling. And my mind doesn't screw me over.
That's exactly what you're doing.
It's shocking how powerful it is, dude. It's shocking.
When I follow you on your podcast, you are doing exactly that. The cold plunges, all that kind of. If you look at the way that sensation is transferred to the brain, the back part of the spinal cord, and I won't get too technical, but the back part of the spinal cord, the spinal thalamic tract, the sort of group of wires that fire up to your brain, hold pain and temperature. So, and emotional pain and physical pain in the brain are handled by very similar structures. So when you go into a cold plunge and you overwhelm that pain pathway, you're giving yourself a break. And then when you're going into this uncomfortable state, because going at your alarm, matching up with that child that's hurting is painful. And then when you're in this cold plunge and you feel uncomfortable and you breathe through it, that's exactly what you need to do as far as feeling that alarmed child in you, because it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. And being able to have the resilience to be able to go, you know what, this hurts, but I'm going to stay with you. As talking to your child, this hurts us, but I'm going to stay with you. You and I will always be together. There is no way that I'm ever going to abandon you again, because I know you're there now. I know you're there now. So now I will make sure that I will never, ever leave you. Now, the child needs to hear that a number of times, because you've been ignoring, not you personally, but collectively. We ignore the child for decades. So it takes a while for the child to come around, but there is this sense that we're on the right track. And for the first time for me, when I started, healing somatically and doing therapies like IFS and that kind of thing. And I think I'll always be in therapy, because I love it so much, just understanding how it works for me so I can help other people understand how it works for them. But really being able to tolerate that pain, because Bessel van der Kolk talks about that in The Body Keeps the Score. He says, we're not teaching people how to get rid of their anxiety. I call it alarm. We're not teaching how to get rid of the alarm. What we're doing is we're teaching you how to acclimatize to it, so that when you feel that discomfort, you don't compulsively and relentlessly go into your head for a solution that you'll never find there.
Right. You need to go into your body.
Stay there.
Where the
even if it hurts.
Alarm is, and you suggest putting your hand there and just breathe through it. Just soothe yourself through that moment. I want to address one more thing in Jason's question. When you wake up in the middle of the night and your thoughts are spinning and you're having trouble going back to sleep, what do you suggest somebody does?
Am I safe in this moment? So we talked about this the last time you and I talked. So this is something that I've used for many, many years. So wake up.
Talk to Jason. So just like, I want you to pretend Jason's here.
Okay.
And let's coach Jason. So Jason, tonight, when you wake up in the middle of the night, if you do, these are the specific things I want you to do.
Yeah. I want you to connect with that feeling in your body, put your hand over it, breathe into it, and then ask yourself, am I safe in this moment? I know I'm freaked out. I know that there's something happening in a week or 2 weeks. So I got to go to the dentist, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. But in this moment right now, where I'm lying in my bed, am I safe? And you go, yeah, I'm safe. And then feel it. Like, you have to associate. This is what I was saying before, is like, you have to connect the feeling with the thinking. That's how we heal. That's how we create new neural pathways, is we create the feeling, and the feeling will sear in the thinking. So when you say, am I safe in this moment? And you go, I am safe. Some people will say, I am safe in this moment, rather than making it a question. But my daughter, Leandra, said that that's the single biggest tip that Dr. Dad has ever given her with regard to her anxiety. Because when she was 21, she still has it a little bit, but when she was 21, she went through a really difficult time. But she said, the most important thing that you've ever told me is, am I safe in this moment? And in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, when your mind is going nuts, you can just say, I know, because anxiety is always about the future. It's always about the future. So if you bring yourself into the present moment, and one of the ways of doing that is with sensation, with sensation, when you touch your own chest, when you take a deep breath, when you smell an essential oil, when you hum, when you sing, you're bringing yourself into the sensation of the present moment, and you're removing that focus on the future, or the past, or the pain of the past. When you bring yourself into the present moment, that's the fertile ground of healing, is the present moment. We don't heal when we're stuck in our trauma. We don't heal when we're stuck in our worries. We heal in the present moment sensation of our body. That's how we heal. Now, the cognitive structures help. Once you, and that's what helped with me, was all the cognitive, behavior therapy and stuff that I did for years and years and years. After I started regulating my body, it was like, oh, this is what it is. It all starts to make sense. The puzzle pieces start coming back into connection again. It's like, oh yeah, like that's what I came about with I didn't get enough attention as a child from my mother. So because my brother was sick with club feet, or my dad was crazy, so I made myself small. So now it's like, I got to be seen. But again, there's part of me that hates being seen. So it is this real dichotomy that I go back and forth of. So now I accept that. I accept that that little boy in me needs the attention, and I give it to him. And I don't need it so much from the outside. And I think that's when you know you're starting to heal. Is like you don't need so much attention from the outside, and you are more connected in your relationships to other people, because when you're in this dissociated alarm state, you're in survival mode. And in survival mode, the social engagement system that all humans have is shut off. Eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, body language. It gets shut off when we're alarmed. So no wonder we don't want to go to a party. No wonder we have social anxiety. No wonder we can't connect with our spouse or our kids, because evolutionarily, we are built when we're in alarm that connection isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for safety. So it's very hard to be warm and connected to your spouse or your kids or whatever when you're in alarm. And a lot of people feel so guilty about that. It's like, and they question their relation. Am I in the right relationship? It's like, you probably are, but you're just dissociated. So you can't love yourself. So you're not going to love another person. So your relationships are going to suffer. And as you quoted the Harvard study, relationships are the most important feature in recovering from any illness of any kind.
So is it normal for people to wake up in the middle of the night? And
yes,
like, why?
Not
why
all,
is that a normal thing?
not every night, but we've all had periods in our, like the dark night of the soul, like I write about in the book.
In terms of people that wake up though in the middle of the night, is that a symptom or a sign that you might have anxiety?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Your reticular activating system, your sympathetic nervous system isn't shutting off. You're not going into parasympathetic rest. And then here's the reason for that. And you're asking me like brilliant questions. So as a child, especially, and I see this a lot with my alcoholic patients, or my patients who had alcoholics as parents, things would go along fine for a while, and then there'd be a massive blow up. And then there'd be this sort of rapprochement. The alcoholic would say, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, and give you all this stuff. And then there would be this period of quiescence again, this quiet again, and then it would blow up again. So what a child's nervous system will do is it'll say, I am not going to let myself relax because I know this shit's going to go down again. So I'm going to keep myself in this hypervigilant state, this sympathetic activated state. So when you're in that sympathetic activated state, you start thinking, it's safer for me to keep myself at this level of activation all the time. And then you can't sleep. You don't eat well. It just screws up your entire life when you can't move yourself into parasympathetic. I remember the quick story that I'll tell you is that I used to get massages from my favorite massage therapist, who's now retired. And sometimes I would walk out of her studio feeling so relaxed that I'll have a panic attack. Because when I was relaxed as a child, that was exactly the time I got smashed in the face by my dad, not physically, but he would be going into depression or going into mania or going into psychosis. So there was this thing with me, it's like, don't get too happy. Don't let your guard down, because this is all going to shit in the near future. And it could be like a year before he would have another episode, but I was always every day. And that's a metaphor for a lot of us with anxiety, is we keep ourselves in this hyper vigilant state, thinking that we're protecting ourselves. And Brene Brown talks about that too. She says, we were expecting that we rehearsed that thing in our mind, getting that call from the school that your child's been hurt or injured or whatever. We do that every day and it never happens, but we punish ourselves. We punish our body when we do that, because it doesn't prepare you for anything. No matter how often you practice that phone call from the school, you're still going to have to react to it. So chapter 62 of my book is about when it's not safe to feel safe. And that's one of the reasons why people have such a hard time healing from anxiety, is because when I get people feeling better again, they don't trust it, because it goes back to that place where when I felt safe as a kid, I got blindsided.
I want to try to connect the dots, particularly on this question about sleep, because we're getting so many questions from listeners who are having trouble sleeping.
Sure.
And you've said a couple things that I want to try to connect. First of all, you have said that all anxiety begins from a moment where you feel separate or unsafe typically during childhood.
Yes.
And that any time from that moment forward that you feel separate or unsafe, it's going to kind of trigger that same stress path of alarm in your body. And then that's going to send your thoughts spiraling, which makes that response of going into an alarm whenever you feel stressed or unsafe second nature, like unconscious.
Yes.
And so for those of you that are kind of new to this discussion and you're having trouble sleeping, I personally believe that after the last 3 years and the unprecedented amount of uncertainty and change separation, yes, that we've all experienced, that most of us are in that hyper-vigilant state waiting for something bad to happen. And now that people are getting laid off and the economy is starting to take a turn, that very familiar alarm loop is getting triggered for a lot of people, and they may not even realize it. And so if you're finding that, wow, I do have a lot of trouble sleeping, or wow, in the last year, I wake up all the time in the middle of the night and I'm just constantly worried about this stuff. What Dr. Kennedy has explained to you is that it goes back to this original alarm of feeling unsafe. And that's why in the middle of the night, lying there thinking about your bills or whether or not the next round of layoffs are coming or how your kid is doing because they're not doing well, putting your hand wherever the tension is and saying, I am safe, or asking, am I safe in this moment? That's the first step, because what you're teaching us, Dr. Kennedy, is you're teaching us how to start to repair the root cause of it, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting this right?
Yes, absolutely.
Is there anything else you would recommend? Because we get a lot of questions technically about sleep. Do I get out of bed? Do I lay in bed? How do I go back to sleep? And since it is absolutely tied to this alarm and the way that it makes the mind spin, and the inability for so many of us to allow ourselves to feel good, to allow ourselves to slow down, to trust that it's going to be okay. Is there anything else that you would recommend that we do in that moment?
Well, breath, physiological sigh will help. So 2 sniffs in and a long, slow exhale.
So did you get that, everybody? It's 2 sniffs in.
And then a long, slow exhale.
What does that do?
Well, it starts to move you into parasympathetic very quickly. So it blocks that sort of sympathetic chain, that chain reaction of feeling, thought, feeling, thought, feeling, thought. As soon as you start moving your body into a parasympathetic state, your state will determine how you think. So the state of your body determines how your mind thinks.
That's so true. Well, we've all had that experience of being stressed before going for a walk or exercising. And after you're done exercising or going for a walk outside, you're like, I feel so much better.
Well, yeah, after Warren's death there, when Chris took you out to paddleball, last thing you wanted to do, right, was move, because there's tremendous inertia to anxiety, alarm. There is this freeze state that we go into. We don't want to do that. But when you force yourself to get into a different, and that's exactly what happened, you got into a different state in your body. And as that state changed, your thoughts changed. So we worship the mind in this society, thinking the mind can fix everything. But it's more related to how your body feels. You will think exactly the way your body feels. And it's very difficult. It's like pushing a rock up a hill when you're feeling anxious or depressed to go, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, because you don't feel happy. And you can change it. Like gratitude is one of those things that actually does start neurochemically changing the chemicals in your brain that allow you to start flipping the switch over to the other side. But you have to use that almost like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like start gratitude first, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go to paddleboard or go to the beach or go somewhere. Because as you point out, the more we stay frozen the more the brain thinks there's something dangerous, and we start secreting cortisol, we start secreting adrenaline, and it supports whatever we think. So if we think we're afraid, your brain will support you. It'll say, yes, you're afraid. If you think, you lean into the balls of your feet and you go, I'm going to go and ask that person to copy or whatever, when you lean in there and you go at what scares you, your brain starts creating your own sort of endogenous, your own brain's natural morphine. It starts creating dopamine, and it tells you you're on the right track. You're on the right track. And that changes your physiology. So it's really this balance between physiology and psychology. But our physiology is so deep. It creates so much of an influence on our psychology that we're not even aware of. And that's my biggest point, is like, why aren't we in therapy paying attention to our physiology as much as our psychology? Because if you just think about it, as you say, because if you look at it from a neuroscience point of view, there's the part, and I won't get too technical, but there's the neocortex, the new brain that all humans have. That's basically the fantastic thinking, memory, all this kind of stuff. And then there's the deeper structures in our brain, the amygdala, the brain stem, that have no concept of words. Your body has no concept of words. Its language is feeling. And if the trauma is stored in your body and the body's language is feeling, you have to change that trauma with a feeling. Just changing your thinking will not do, well, it won't do much. It will help you. It will help you. There's no doubt. It will help you cope, but it will not help you heal.
Can we get technical for just a minute?
Sure.
So when it comes to sensation and feeling, whether it's the pit in the stomach or the kind of getting tense in your chest, or it's a wave that you might feel, are you saying that all of that feeling or sensation that is something that's happening in your nervous system channels up through the brainstem, which has no access to words?
Yes.
And then it gets converted into some kind of explanation.
Yes, absolutely.
By the prefrontal cortex.
And other parts too, memory parts too. Yep.
So it's almost like a game of telephone.
Yep.
Where your nervous system is feeling something and sending through the parts of the brain that have no language a message. And the prefrontal cortex is interpreting it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interpreting it as unsafe, danger. And you're saying that we have to learn how to feel the sensation and deal with the sensation before the prefrontal cortex is allowed to make it mean something.
Yes. Your mind is a compulsive meaning-making, make sense machine. So when it feels something in your body, it has to make sense of it. That, especially the left hemisphere, analytical, like verbal, literal, it has to make sense of it. So it makes sense of it with words, and it gives you words, stories that are typically pretty painful because they're consistent with the alarm feeling in your body. If you're feeling great, if you're walking down the street, it's a sunny day, everything's going great, your thoughts are going to be pretty darn good. But if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling alarmed, and you've got a dentist appointment like a week later or whatever, you're going to fixate on that dentist appointment because it makes sense to your brain. It's like, we feel bad. What do we have to feel bad about? And then we do that stacking that I was talking about the last time we talked about. We start stacking. So every negative thing in your life at that point, oh, my relationship is not going, oh, I've got taxes, oh, I've got to do my account, all that stuff stacks on top of each other. So when it does that, it just changes you. It keeps you in that negative state. So it's really about, okay, I'm anxious, like we were saying earlier. Okay, where is that in your body? Now you can start, when you start finding the anxiety in the alarm in your body, now you're starting actually to get the root cause, because in your head, you will never solve it. You will always be caught in your head. You will never get out of your head.
I literally have struggled with anxiety my entire life. And anxiety, for this conversation, the way I define it is the habit of worrying spiraled out of control. You may say that you are a worrier. That's not true. You have a habit of worrying. A habit is a pattern of behavior or thinking that you repeat without realizing it. So anxiety happens when that pattern of worrying about things spirals out of control, and now it starts to marry and manifest itself with physical sensations too. That's all that it is. I know that I say that's all that it is. Me personally, I struggled with anxiety, I think my entire life. It became quite acute when I was in my late teens and early 20s. I became medicated in the middle of law school. I took Zoloft for 2 decades. When our first daughter was born, who is now 17, the postpartum depression and the cascading panic was so terrible that not only was I medicated and couldn't breastfeed, but I couldn't be left alone with her.
Wow.
So when I say you can cure yourself of anxiety, I don't say that lightly. 4 years ago, after I had been using the 5-second rule to change my behavior, how I spoke to my husband, how I negotiate in business meetings, how I conduct sales, the kind of parent that I am, my health habits, my eating habits, curbing the drinking, I thought, I wonder if I can use this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing to get control of my thought patterns. Not my behavior patterns, my thought patterns. Yes, you can. Wow. So we're gonna build this conversation, because I want to start with something we can all relate to, and that is, how do you stop worrying, and how do you stop listening to self-doubt? This is how you're going to do it. So all day long, you're going to have moments where your thoughts drift, and I use that word on purpose, because for me, there is a physical sensation when you start to use the 5-second rule and you start to wake up, not only on time in the morning, but you wake up to your life and the opportunities in your life. Your thoughts drift. Like, you'll just be hanging out with your friends, and then suddenly you're like, I'm not sure that person likes me anymore. I haven't heard from my kids lately. I wonder if they're dead, or, as a check, like, you just start worrying about stuff. Why? Because it's a habit. Because when you're not paying attention, your brain shifts from you being a decision maker and paying attention to you just kind of spinning things on autopilot, and one of your habits is worrying. The second you wake up and you notice, holy cow, I'm talking some negative garbage to myself right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've just shifted the part of the brain that you're using. You've shifted from the basal ganglia, which is where your habit loops are spinning, and you've awakened your prefrontal cortex. You've also interrupted that pattern. Now what you're going to do, because your mind is actually ready to receive a different thought because of the counting, now you can put in an anchor thought. Like, if you have a mantra, if you've got a vision about the way that your business is going to turn out in 5 years, if you just have a thought that makes you really happy and proud, insert that. Now, why does this work? It works because of the counting. And I'm not kidding. We know, based on research, that positive thinking alone, not effective. In some instances, trying to force yourself to think positive can actually make the worries worse. Why? Well, the reason why is because it's really hard to just change the channel. What we have to do first is basically interrupt it and turn off the TV, and then turn it back on with the prefrontal cortex awakened. So the counting is essential. And so you can start using this today. You catch yourself talking garbage to yourself, because we all know if I were to put a speaker on your head and broadcast, you would be sitting here in the audience, you'd be in an insane asylum, because the crap that you say to yourself is insane. And the problem is we listen to it. You'll be in a sales meeting and you'll be undermining yourself. They're not going to buy. Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. You're not even present. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Switch it back. Get back to that vision that you have about toasting your success, or this customer being really happy, or you being proud of yourself. Whatever that vision may be, you can control your thoughts. And this is not just us talking about it. This is a tool that you can use. So let's take it a step further. So worrying, if you let it go unchecked, what will happen is you will get used to worrying. You will get used to living in a state where you're slightly agitated all the time. Let me talk a little bit about agitation. So what we know based on research is that physically, in your body, so physiologically, being excited is the exact same thing as being afraid. Let me say that again, because it is so important. In your body, being excited is the exact same thing as being afraid. Your body doesn't know the damn difference. Your heart races, your armpits sweat, you're like, you may get tight in your throat. Your cheeks may get pink like mine do when I get excited. The only difference between excitement and fear is what your brain says. And the problem is, if you have a habit of worrying, guess what you're going to tell yourself is going on? That you're like freaking out. That you're not excited, that something must be wrong. Oh gosh, why would you say something's wrong? Because you got a habit of saying that all the time. Even as I became a speaker for a living, or I'd be on CNN, when I first started doing it, I would be freaking out backstage. But even though, like, just last week, standing backstage, about to go on, 8,000 people, heart races, armpit sweat, my hands get clammy. I'm not nervous though, not at all. I'm excited. And so I developed this technique, and research out of Harvard, not based on my technique, but something very similar, proves that if you basically, right before you're about to do something, take a test, run a race, public speaking, a business negotiation, ask somebody to marry you, whatever it may be that gets your heart racing, just do this. Go, I'm excited. I'm excited to give that speech. I'm excited to ask him or her. I'm excited to do this race. I'm excited. Because what happens is you give your brain context, so your brain doesn't escalate the stuff going on in your body. Your brain's not worried. Make sense?
Yeah.
So you can combine this with the 5-second rule. So we know how to do worrying. You catch your thoughts drift, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, anchor thought. If you start to feel your heart racing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to awaken the prefrontal cortex, and then start going, I'm really excited to do this. I'm really excited to do this. Another technique that you can use is ask, I think they call it interrogatory questions, where instead of giving yourself a pep talk, say, well, why am I ready to do this? Why am I ready? Because that'll force you to answer the question, which then convinces you. So why am I ready to close this sale? Why am I ready to give this speech? Why am I ready? So those are two strategies that you can use backed by science that are proven to actually make your performance be much better. Now let's take it a step further to anxiety. So anxiety is what happens when the habit of worrying spins out of control, your body gets really agitated, and then you allow your mind to escalate it into a full-blown panic attack. So for those of you that have not had the pleasure of having a panic attack, let me explain what it's like. So have you ever been in your car and you're driving down the road and you go to change lanes and all of a sudden there's like, oh my God, there's a car right there, right? And you swerve a little bit and then your heart's like, and you may sweat a little bit and you grip the wheel really tight and you're super locked in on the road ahead of you. But then that car pulls away and the near miss scenario passes and your mind starts going, okay, you're all right now.
Right.
You're all right now. That's it. That's all. That's what a panic attack is, only it happens while you're standing in front of your coffee pot. Seriously. You have that same, oh my God, what behind that? And your heart's racing, and the problem for your brain is that your brain can't look around and say, holy cow, we almost got hit by a car.
Right.
Your brain's saying, what the hell is wrong with her? She's making coffee and she's freaking out. And so now your brain has a problem, because what's your brain's job? It's designed to protect you. So your brain will now do whatever it can to magnify the problem. Remember, we talked about the spotlight effect. It'll start telling you all kinds of crazy stuff because it can't figure out contextually what the hell's going on. She's just making coffee, now her heart is racing and she's breathing really. Holy cow, maybe she is having a heart attack. A lot of people that have panic attacks say, I think I'm dying, oh my God, what's happening? Wow. Or you'll see them do the deer in the headlights thing where they got to get out of the room. That is the spotlight effect in your brain, now taking control and magnifying everything to get you out of whatever it was. So here's how you use the 5-second rule. You use it to stabilize your thoughts before the panic escalates. And then what happens is it drifts into worry and then it disappears. Right. So the second you feel worry, you catch it, you train yourself to do that. If you start feeling yourself getting, your heart racing, you can 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and use the I'm excited. If that doesn't work, literally 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just give yourself an anchor thought, literally, of you being okay. Why allow your mind to dwell in worries about things that either haven't happened or problems that haven't resulted yet? or situations that are beyond your control, why do this? And I'm here to tell you, I don't want you to do this. And I want to bring in some spirituality real quick, because there is this saying in Buddhism that I think is so beautiful, and it's so relevant to what you and I are talking about right now. You ready? So in Buddhism, any time that you or I suffer from some kind of misfortune, and the misfortune might just be that you haven't heard from somebody in a couple days, or it might just be that you got a bad annual review at work, or it might just be that you suddenly got a bill or a diagnosis that scares the living daylights out of you, okay? Anytime that a human being suffers some kind of misfortune in life, there are two arrows that get fired. You ready? The first arrow hits you when the painful event occurs. So this is the arrow that gets fired at you, like right in your heart. And for me this morning, as small of an example as it is, grabbing my phone, looking for my daughter's location, seeing a rainbow wheel instead of some sort of location at a hostel, thinking about the fact that I haven't heard from her since I saw the sunrise photo 2 days ago, that moment, was an arrow. Your arrow might be that somebody breaks up with you. It might be the number on the scale. It might be, again, that bill that just arrived and you're like, I don't have $1,000 to fix my car right now. It might be that you didn't get into the school you wanted to get into. It might be that you start coughing and you're really worried about something going on because there's something that is a health diagnosis in your family. There is the first arrow. Boom, hits, right? The second arrow that gets fired is your reaction to what just happened. It's the arrow that you fire at yourself based on what you think next. And when you start to understand that life is going to fire arrows at you all the time, the research shows you get at least 3 or 4 a day. That triggers you to worry. The worry, the anxiety, the catastrophizing, that is the second arrow. And it causes you so much pain. And I'm going to prove this to you based on some research studies that they've done about how anticipatory worry or being afraid of something or this kind of negative thinking lights up the pain pathways in your brain. And I love this visual of the two arrows in life, right? That anytime you suffer misfortune, boom, 2 arrows fly in the air. The first one is fired by life. It hits you right in the heart. And the second arrow is the arrow that you fire right into your forehead. It's your reaction. And that adds pain. And this is also a concept that has been studied and researched extensively in psychology. What psychologists and psychiatrists call this is having a primary and secondary emotional response. So your primary emotional response is your immediate reaction to having something bad happen or a fear of yours or some sort of expectation that you have. The secondary emotion that you feel, this is the thing that lingers, is the emotions that you sit with in reaction to it. So examples of this might be that when somebody dies, you have a primary emotion of profound shock and sadness and despair. It's that just avalanche that hits you. But the secondary emotion is the grief that can last a long time. And what we know based on research is that you don't really have a lot of control on the primary emotion. But there are a tremendous number of things that you can do in order to shorten the experience of the secondary emotion that you have. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that second arrow, the pain you cause yourself. And we're talking about it specifically based on the pain that worrying and catastrophizing, assuming the worst, what that's doing to your health, to your mindset, to your nervous system, to your attitude, and to your ability to experience more joy and fulfillment in your life. And that's why I'm on a mission today to both stop myself from firing that second arrow at my forehead and interrupt it, grab it out of the air, so that I can assume something really good is happening. I can assume that it's all going to work out, and I can stop torturing myself with all this shit that I'm making up anyway. And I want you to do the exact same thing. It's so easy to catch somebody's anxiety. And so I wanted you, Chris, to address some of these questions, because the first question was, do you ever catch my anxiety when I get anxious?
No.
Break down what you do. If I start getting anxious, like I did on Sunday, or I have throughout our 24-year marriage, what do you do? Because you have this superpower of being able to remain calm. And the thing that I find the most validating is, even though you don't feel anxious, you are able to validate my reality of being anxious, even though you're not in the same reality.
Touch is huge, right?
What do you mean touch?
Meaning being able to hold your hand, or being close and upfront and personal to what you're experiencing, just pulling what you're feeling out of your mouth. Like that act of inviting you to describe what's going on, to give detail to it, and to almost not let up, to keep like pulling a thread, like what else is going on? What else is there? What else are you feeling? And I think maybe part of the reason why I don't get triggered by it in that moment is because I've seen it work so effectively that once you get it all out,
It's like barfing.
it dissipates. It may not just extinguish itself, but it will go away.
So technique number one is to give somebody a hug or hold their hand, center them with physical touch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sit up close in front of them. Make sure that you have the as much eye contact as you can have physically with that person.
And then the second thing you do is give people the questions that you might start asking the person in your life that's feeling anxious.
Well, I would start with, tell me about your anxiety right now. What are you feeling? What's happening? Not only physically in your body, but of course emotionally. I mean, those are the two main pillars.
And then you keep going, and anything else. And he does that over until I'm literally like the tank is completely empty. You know what else I've noticed, and I think this is a really important thing, is that you don't respond to what comes out of my mouth.
No answers. You cannot provide any direction or guidance or go for the solve.
Why?
Because there is no solve, particularly when you're in the acute moment. There is nothing is going to resolve that right there and then, even if you have the most best, idea ever.
What is it that you've observed when you get somebody back to zero and in the moment? What do you observe in the person?
People coming back to right now, and how that is in and of itself is such a powerful grounding mechanism. When you're right here, you're out of your head. You're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or wherever the source of that anxiety may be coming from. You're present to your physical space and surroundings, and that, I think, I know it has a profound effect on calming it, not necessarily extinguishing it, but certainly calming it.
I think that's your superpower. I really do. Like, you are the most grounded, calm person in my life. I wonder if it's the years of having a meditation practice and being a practicing Buddhist that has trained that skill in you.
I've never sat down to think about where it comes from necessarily, but yes, in Buddhist tradition or practices, completely just being in observance and the act of deep listening, not just, opening your ears, but really listening for what is being said is totally, that's right up a Buddhist alley for sure.
Wow. Now I know why our kids like you more. I'm more fun, but you're the one that grounds us all. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.